Hello everyone, welcome back to another edition of BrainScratch Searchlight. I'm your host John Lorden, and there are some cases that in the middle of me researching them, I start feeling like I'm swimming, like I'm just in this vast ocean of info and opinions, and for some reason usually it seems like those are the episodes that you, the viewers, seem to appreciate the most. I have a feeling this is going to be one of those episodes, and what's very surprising about this is a missing person that only occurred a year ago. It was actually 1 year ago this past Sunday, July 10th, in 2015, that this young toddler, only 2.5-year-old Deorr Kunz, went missing. So just taking a look at the poster here, let's dive right in. As I said, missing since July 10th, 2015, missing from Deorr, Idaho. Date of birth is December 30th, 2012. He would now be 3 years old. He's a male, white, blonde hair, brown eyes, 3 feet tall, 28 pounds. And it also notes that Deorr was last seen wearing a camouflage jacket and blue pajama pants. Of course, there's contact information here, which I will also have in the description box below. One thing that's missing from this is at least his parents are also saying that he was wearing cowboy boots. And the cowboy boots have become a bit of a point of contention we're going to discuss in a little bit. But let's check out the basics of the story here. We're going to start with an article at Huffington Post. And just to let you know, this story has gotten all kinds of coverage. Now that it's 1 year past, People magazine apparently did a big write-up on it this past week. It's been featured on Nancy Grace. It's been featured on Dr. Drew's show. I mean, it's really, there's a lot of media coverage around this case, but I think there's some very important reasons why we need to cover it and hopefully help try to get some more eyes on this young man's face and see if he can be found. Deorr Kunz Jr.'s parents thought his grandfather was watching him, but the 2-year-old Idaho boy's grandfather thought his parents had an eye on him. Deorr disappeared from the Timber Creek campground in Deorr, Idaho on Friday afternoon, according to KTVB. He hasn't been seen since. Here we have another shot. I think they cropped that for the poster, but here's a bigger shot of him. Now, the official line is, at least for this story, Deorr Kunz Jr. wandered off from his family's campsite on Friday. Over the weekend, rescue teams scoured more than 2 miles of the campground on foot, on horseback, and with divers. We haven't found a thread, Lemhi County Sheriff's Incident Commander Dave Morelli told KTVB. The sheriff's office did not immediately respond to the Huffington Post's request for comment. One of the, in one way, kind of good things that is happening in this case is there is some local media that is doing a particularly good job of digging into this case, interviewing the people that were there. Basically, there's a kind of wide cast of characters. There's another article I'm going to go through where we're going to go through each of them individually. But on this camping trip, you essentially have Deorr, you have his father, you have his mother. They are not married, they're engaged at this time. You have the mother's grandfather, which that makes it Deorr's great-grandfather, and then a fishing friend of that grandfather. Now, this fishing friend does not know the parents and does not know Deorr. This is the first time that this fishing friend is meeting all of them. And pretty much everyone has been interviewed about what has happened except for Deorr's great-grandfather. He has not done any public interviews about this. And another important thing to know about him is he is somewhat sickly. He has to take an oxygen respirator with him wherever he goes. Supposedly he had that at the campground with them. And approximately 8 months after he went missing, there was a bit of a dramatic turn in the investigation.
Now, this group was hired originally by the family to find out what happened to their son, and yet now the Klein investigations has come out and said it's a homicide, and the mother and the grandfather know exactly what happened. So we will have much more on this for you tonight.
Yes, the private investigator hired by the family and then quickly fired by them is basically coming out and saying that he believes that there is some foul play that is going on here. And there are a handful of reasons to believe that there might be foul play involved here. For example, the campground that they're staying at, there's only one way in and out to that campground for a vehicle to go, and none of the 4 witnesses that were there seem to recall any vehicle coming through there. I did see the father in one interview talked about a road that kind of went above the campground and you could look down onto the campground from up there. But you'd have to think of the logistics of someone coming down that hill, hiding in the creek, waiting for an opportunity to grab this kid, keeping him muffled and quiet, going back up the hill, getting in their vehicle and taking off. And according to the family's testimony, or at least their public comments, they only missed Deorr for about 10 minutes. So it doesn't really seem to hold up. They're saying 10 to 15 minutes max is the time frame that it took for the fishing buddy, the 2 parents to go walking. Apparently he was showing them where a fishing hole was. The great-grandfather had stayed back with Deorr, and at some point in that 10 to 15 minute walk, the great-grandfather thought, oh, Deorr went off with his parents. The parents thought he's back with grandpa. They come back 15 minutes later, hey, where's Deorr? And they all start looking for him. I have noticed some minor discrepancies in the stories. For example, one of the earlier accounts I read said that they looked for him for approximately an hour before his mom got on the phone with 911. Then I saw an interview with both of his parents, and his father says that they were looking for about 20 minutes before the mom got on the phone for the 911 call. And even the 911 call is kind of mysterious in itself. There is a link down below. I've included a bunch of video links for this case. There is just so much media around this. But you can hear her 911 call down below. But what's strange about it is the father decided that he felt like he didn't have enough cell signal, so he jumped in his truck and went driving down the road. He admits that he had 1 bar, but he says, well, I just didn't want the call to, get terminated in the middle of it, so I wanted to be sure that I had a better signal, and I knew about a half mile down the road there was a better signal, so I drove out there. At one point, both of the parents are on the phone to 911 at the same time. Admittedly, I'm sure they're panicking. I'm sure it is somewhat reasonable just as a backup plan to say, you go ahead and stay here just in case he's here. Go ahead and try to call 911. I'm going to jump in the truck and try to make sure I'm in a better signal area so the call doesn't get dropped. But that's just one little tiny discrepancy, and according to at least the Klein investigation agency, there are a lot of discrepancies coming out of the mouths of both of the parents. So this is a really, really strange case, because when I got to the end of it, I wasn't sure what to believe, but I do still think that there is a chance that he was abducted and might be being raised by someone else. And I think we need to act on that chance and just make sure that all of you know about this boy's case so you can help if he is indeed out there somewhere. So let's go through some details about the case here. The family is originally from Idaho Falls. Apparently it's about a 1.5 or 2 hour drive out to Deorr. And then the Timber Creek campground is about 10 miles southwest of Deorr, so you can see a little map here about where they were. So here is another picture of Deorr. Just breaks my heart seeing a cute young man like this and knowing that he's out there missing somewhere. His nickname is, quote, Little Man, and his parents say he never went anywhere without his blanket, his cup, or his stuffed monkey. And in the interview I saw with them, which is also in the links below, they said all those items were left behind. His parents say he was wearing large cowboy boots, pajama pants, and a camouflage jacket the day he disappeared. Here's his mother, Jessica Mitchell. She is now the former fiance of Deorr's father, Vernal Deorr Kunz. She has 2 other children from a previous relationship. She maintains that she and Kunz left Deorr with her grandfather as the couple went to explore Timber Creek campground. When they returned, their 2-year-old was gone. She believes Deorr may have been abducted. In January, the sheriff named Mitchell a suspect in Deorr's disappearance. Yes, this case has a lot of crazy turns. I can't believe that, honestly, all this has happened just within a 1-year time span. The sheriff, Lynn Bowerman, said that the child was either accidentally or intentionally killed. Investigators say Mitchell's account of what happened at the campground has repeatedly changed over the past year. Mitchell has never been arrested and says she has nothing to do with Deorr's disappearance. Mitchell recently married a local man, and the couple lives in Idaho Falls. Just another bit of a strange wrinkle in this story for me. You're looking at her losing a son, and then within 8 months or so, she is remarried to someone completely different. It just really gets my head spinning about what could be going on there. Is there potentially some motive for her to have not had that child anymore? Was she potentially dating someone else when she went on this trip with her fiance at the time and Deorr's father? There's just a lot of questions that pop into my head when I hear that little piece of information. Vernal Deorr Kunz, father of Deorr Kunz Jr., former fiance of the mother, Jessica Mitchell, truck driver who recently moved out of state. I have seen other articles that say he's still living in Idaho, so I'm not positive that that fact is correct. Maintains he and Mitchell went to explore Timber Creek Campground and left their son with Mitchell's grandfather. When they returned, Deorr was gone. Believes Deorr may have been abducted from the campground. In January, Bowerman named Kunz a suspect in Deorr's disappearance. Yes, the father is now also named a suspect. He said the child was either accidentally or intentionally killed. Investigators say Kunz's account of what happened at the campground has repeatedly changed over the past year. Kunz has never been arrested and says he has nothing to do with Deorr's disappearance. Now we get to her grandfather, Deorr's great-grandfather, Robert Walton. Grandfather of Mitchell, accompanied Kunz, Mitchell, and Deorr on a trip to Timber Creek Campground. Walton frequented Timber Creek in his younger years, according to family members. Walton is elderly and requires an oxygen machine to breathe properly. Detectives have named Walton a person of interest in Deorr's disappearance. He's never been named a suspect. Walton lives in Idaho Falls with his daughter. Walton is the only person on the camping trip who has not spoken publicly about the case. And then to round out the four, Isaac Reinwand. Walton asked Reinwand to accompany the group on the camping trip. He had never met Mitchell, Kunz, or Deorr before the day of the trip. They drove, Reinwand and Walton, to the campsite separately from the others in the group. He has been named a person of interest in the disappearance, but never a suspect. He says he was fishing at Timber Creek Campground when Deorr disappeared. There's another little part of the story where if you hear the interview with him, he says that he was walking with Deorr's mother and he assumed the father was close behind them with Deorr. When he got them to the first fishing hole that was down by the creek, he then walked back downstream of the creek to a second fishing hole that he knew of, and apparently he started fishing down there. So he's a bit removed from the turmoil of them heading back, figuring out the kids missing. He is later told by the great-grandfather, Walton, who's basically yelling from an embankment down to that fishing spot in the creek, that Deorr is missing, and that's how he first hears about it. Investigators say Reinwand's account of what happened at the campground has remained consistent over the past year. He lives in Idaho Falls, says he has not spoken with Kunz and Mitchell since the camping trip, but he does maintain contact with Walton. Here we have Lynn Bowerman, the sheriff of Lemhi County since 2010. He's the one that names Jessica Mitchell and Vernal Kunz as suspects in January. His theory is that something happened to this little boy, possibly an accidental death, and they are indeed covering it up. What I struggle with in that scenario is the weekend that this all happened and this little boy went missing, nearly 200 volunteer searchers came out to that area, and they have searched close to a 3-mile perimeter around this campsite, and nothing has been found. Now, there are some strange wrinkles in particular, and I don't know exactly how this happened. Their search had started, and apparently someone showed up to bring the cremated remains of a loved one and to spread them out in that area. And they actually did start spreading them. And apparently that gave the investigation a bit of a twist, because now the dogs are hitting on the smell that was spread from these cremated remains. So I don't know if it's very difficult to rope off that type of area, but just another strange wrinkle in a very, very strange story. Last week, Bowerman said the case is moving more and more towards being a homicide case. He is not running for re-election and will retire when his term ends in December. And this is the guy that's following him up, Steve Penner, who's a chief deputy with the sheriff's office, and he's currently the lead investigator in the case. He's been supervising the volunteer and professional searches over the past year, and he did run for county sheriff and won, so he will take over in January of 2017. Now we get into the private investigators, and this is the first one, Frank Vilt. In August, Vilt volunteered to serve as Mitchell and Kunz's private investigator. He claimed Deorr was likely abducted from the campground and offered a $5,000 reward for information on the case, but he terminated his relationship with Mitchell and Kunz in September after accusing the couple of lying about the case. And we actually have a letter here that he wrote to them, September 25th, 2015. Dear Deorr and Jessica, the father is also known as Deorr Sr., Vernal, so that's who he's referring to there, regarding the investigation of Deorr Jr. As I previously informed you today via my text to your cellular telephone at 8:31 a.m., I am withdrawing from the investigation because of circumstances beyond my control, including but not limited to a breach of trust on your part concerning your refusal to allow me to make this case national. I'm perplexed as to why you did not want me to advertise the $20,000 reward. I guess it was more than $5,000 we heard reported. I was willing to put up personal funds in the hopes that the public could provide information leading to the whereabouts of your son. When I agreed to assist you, I informed you that I would work for my out-of-pocket expenses. I was willing to forego my normal hourly fee. My stipulation was that both of you would be absolute truthful. I told both of you that if I felt like you were not telling the truth, stalling me, or otherwise misleading me, that I would withdraw from the investigation. In my professional opinion, both of you lied and misrepresented the true facts that could solve the mystery of your missing son. There are other aspects of this case that I cannot go into at this time, but simply put, I believe that the searches will all be non-productive. The searches are only used by you to cover a possible crime that one or both of you may have committed. My suggestion is that you fully cooperate with the Lemhi County Sheriff and tell the truth. I do not appreciate the fact that one or both of you are spreading rumors that you have paid me. I have not received reimbursement to cover my expenses. I also feel that you are exploiting the public for financial gain. How can you live with yourselves? Sooner or later, the truth will come out. Very strong words, and he's not the only private investigator to start working for them and then bail on them. We also have Philip Klein, senior private civil investigator with Klein Investigations based in Nederland, Texas, hired and paid for by the Kunz family in November. In February, Klein released his findings and announced Deorr was intentionally or accidentally killed. The Kunz family terminated the relationship with Klein in March 2016. Klein claims an anonymous individual is paying him to continue to investigate. In March, Klein told EastIdahoNews.com that Mitchell knows where Deorr's body is, but refuses to say where. In June, Klein conducted a search of Timber Creek Campground and claims to have found new evidence. I just want to give a quick shout out to EastIdahoNews.com, and in particular, their YouTube work. Many of the links that you're going to see below, which are interviews with the people that are involved in this case, come from EastIdahoNews.com. They did an excellent job of really digging into this case and staying on top of it over the past year. And quite honestly, I don't believe that it would have the national attention that it does without their good work. So I know quite frequently I am critical of media. I also like to point out whenever there is good media happening, particularly in news reporting, and I think that they're doing a great job with this case. Now back to Mr. Klein. He is also getting a lot of attention for this case. He's showing up on several news shows, and he's being very vocal about these opinions. one of the important things, which I haven't discussed with you guys yet, is both the husband or the father and the mother failed multiple polygraph tests. And Klein actually gets into some of the details of those tests. He says that they start failing from even some of the checkpoint questions like, are you intending to be truthful in our interview today? He says that they fail those right off the bat. He also did say that the mother has pretty much admitted to his investigators that the child is indeed dead and she knows where the body is, but then she won't go any further. Now, the mother did also make her own comment about him making that comment, and she says none of that is true. She never said that. Both of the links are down below so you can see for yourself, and I don't know, maybe you could judge based on the footage who's telling the truth there. I'm really not sure. I get the feeling that Klein is trying to do the right things, but I do somewhat feel like he's getting caught up in the spotlight a little bit. He's saying that he's working pretty close with the sheriff's department. The sheriff's department is also collaborating with another local sheriff's department, and even the FBI is helping to assist on this case. I think that might be possibly because the park might be federally owned, but regardless, you've also got the FBI looking into this case. And it just keeps drawing me back to that question. When you have all these resources, all these people looking into this case, what the heck happened out there, and where is this little boy? Now, one thing that the sheriff was really caught up on is those cowboy boots. Apparently, the cowboy boots are several sizes too big for Deorr to wear, and his family had commented that even when he's trying to walk in them normally, he will sometimes walk right out of them because they're so big and loose they would fall right off his feet. The sheriff is struggling because he believes that if the boy was taken by anyone, one of those boots could have fallen off. There should be some remnant of that kid left behind. And the same case for if he was taken by an animal attack of some kind. What's the likelihood that an animal could whisk him away and happen to take those big clunky boots with him? Apparently this area does have bears, it does have wolf dens, there is some potential for an animal attack to have occurred here. But when you hear the great-grandfather's story with the parents' story of them only being 150 yards away from the campground, don't you think that they would have heard a call for help, or that the boy would have screamed or something if he was attacked by an animal? I think there would be some likelihood to that. Alan Browning, Idaho Falls-based attorney representing Vernal Kunz and Jessica Mitchell, claims Mitchell and Kunz had nothing to do with Deorr's disappearance, and it's likely a wild animal snatched the child from the campsite. Says his clients are suing Kline for defamation after the private investigator continues to make statements about the case. So now we have a defamation case going on here, which, if the parents are in the right, I think that makes total sense. There was a pretty interesting moment where I saw him interviewed, and they were asking, is he fairly representing both the mother and the father since they are no longer together, and since one of them could potentially have been a culprit in this case and the other one not? And he doesn't feel like there's any conflict of interest there, but I really have to wonder about it. So now we're jumping to NBCnews.com, and this is an article literally from today. There is just a ton of news coming out about this case, particularly because right now is the anniversary. I'm hoping that all this renewed interest, like I said, will get much more eyes on this young man's face and maybe help figure out what happened to him, or potentially even bring him home. But just for a little more detail, the parents' separate 911 calls triggered an investigation that's left more questions than answers. Discrepancies quickly emerged in the accounts of the circumstances which under Deorr vanished. Inconsistencies in statements from the Tot's parents became public. Officials say both have failed multiple polygraph tests. I believe his parents are hiding something. There's no doubt in my mind, Lemhi County Sheriff Lynn Bowerman told Dateline. We gave them every opportunity to explain if it was an accident of some kind, and they haven't. The sheriff added he believes the case, quote, has to be a homicide, and does not believe Deorr is anywhere on the mountain. Which, if my mind starts going down that scenario, you have to wonder a few things, and I have seen some of the investigators that look into this case ask this question too. Was Deorr even on the trip in the first place? Did he ever get to the campground? If you look into the testimony of Isaac, Isaac is pretty clear that Deorr was indeed there. There's a 3-part series that you'll find in the description box below that is essentially, I think, about a 20 or 25-minute interview with him. There's some things about that interview that sort of disturb me. The interviewer asks him at certain points, do you remember the last time you saw Deorr? Do you remember what he was doing? And his memory kind of goes fuzzy. And do you remember Deorr's parents carrying him when you were walking with them? He just can't seem to recall. For me personally, when I'm involved with traumatic things, my memory starts retreading over those types of details over and over and over. In particular, if it was a missing person, I would think that that night, even when I'm trying to go to sleep, my brain is going to be chewing over the last time I saw them and trying to piece together from that moment what happened to them following it. And Isaac just does not appear to have that going on. There's also a pretty interesting turn in terms of the parents and their lawyer. I saw a comment from the lawyer about Isaac, and he is now saying Isaac suffers from bipolar disorder and has a known criminal history. Now, I did not bump into any other information about that. I can't really verify it. I think it's kind of interesting that the lawyer of the parents is starting to paint Isaac in this way, particularly when from all accounts and for all practical purposes, we can say at least his story has remained consistent through this whole thing. I don't get the feeling when I'm watching him being interviewed that he's lying necessarily. I almost feel like he might have been tricked, but if I consider that, then you have to consider that this was premeditated in some way. Like, did the mother contact her grandfather and say, hey, we need another witness out there, so if you have any friends, let's just bring a friend out here and we can kind of dupe him while we take care of Deorr? I don't know. I mean, that type of premeditation seems extremely dark to me. I really don't know that I can imagine a scenario where a parent would do that kind of thing, but you know, it's a world full of very different people. I did have this one little wrinkle in my brain about what if Deorr was not the son of Deorr Sr., of Vernal? And what if that information came out lately? Is there potentially something at that point where the father might have been so upset that he wanted to harm the young boy? Or the father and the mother decided that both of them, neither one of them wanted to care for the boy if they were splitting up, which obviously in a number of months they do split up, and she jumps into not just a relationship but a marriage with someone else. Did this boy kind of catch some side effect of a relationship going bad? I don't know. But without a body and without good motive, I'm even struggling to look at this in that way, and that's why I wanted to make this an episode of Searchlight. I think there's still a chance that this boy could be out there somewhere, and I want to rewind Sheriff Bowerman back to a year ago and share a little comment with you guys that he gave us.
We're still asking the public to help us if they have any information to identify a 2.5-year-old with blonde hair. I'm not sure that's a positive thing for our office, because every 2.5-year-old with blonde hair looks just like Deorr. And so I'm asking the public if they know the family and they didn't have a 2.5-year-old prior to this time period. That's one I want to look at closely. But if it's somebody they don't know, to contact their local law enforcement and have them follow up for us, because it's just so overwhelming for our small office.
Yeah.
And once again, not only do I want to credit East Idaho News, and in particular, I believe his name's Nate, if I remember right, for doing a great job in this case. It's very cool to me to see law enforcement openly engage media and share some time with them and share their thoughts as openly as this. This is definitely a small community that feels to me like it's trying to do everything to find this young man And that is a bit of a refreshing feeling, even though we haven't found him yet. For me to see people care like this kind of warms me up inside, because in so many of these cases I'm constantly questioning, are the authorities doing everything they can? But in this case, I don't think we can ask that question. I mean, you've got them reaching out to sister sheriff department. There, you've got the FBI pitching in on this. You have private investigators donating their time to this. It really seems like a lot of people tried to rush to help Deorr, and I hope that you are one of those people as well. So let me bring up his picture once again here. And please keep him in mind. He would be a little bit older now, about a year older. Is he out there somewhere? Is there a family that you know that all of a sudden has a blonde son that just popped into their lives? I think that is the big question. That is our best chance at finding Deorr, if he is indeed out there alive. Outside of that, I think we could continue to speculate. I know that I will certainly be keeping tabs on this case. I just want to see where it goes from here. I don't know if they're going to try to push through some type of charge against these parents. I know that they're concerned about a double jeopardy situation, so they don't want to charge the parents too early and then not have the right evidence. The parents they come out with a not guilty verdict, and then later the sheriff finds the evidence they need to get a proper verdict. They won't be able to charge them again. So I do think it makes sense that they're holding off on formally charging the parents, but they have been named as suspects. We do know that they're failing polygraph tests, but I've heard from many of you guys, and I even have to ask myself the question, are those polygraph tests really trustworthy in cases like this? You have people that are already emotionally distraught talking about this subject. Is that skewing the results in some way? Or are we able to trust those tests more than that? I'll tell you, I used to believe in those a lot more until I started doing research for this show. And in particular, for the research I did on the West Memphis 3, you had people that were failing polygraph tests that are basically two different theories of what could have happened there. So I know in one of those polygraph failures, it's an incorrect failure. I know it's basically a bad result. So it's really made me question those polygraph tests, and obviously if they're not admissible in court, there has to be some reason to question them. But in any case, I hope that Deorr is out there safe somewhere. If there are people taking care of him, I hope that they will wake up and do the right thing and return him to his family. It's a heartbreaker on so many fronts. And if the parents did do something in this case, I hope the evidence comes forth. If you have information on where Deorr is, or even what happened to Deorr, there is contact information below. Please, please, please use it. Do the right thing. Get it to the authorities, and maybe we can find justice or even find Deorr. Thank you so much for joining me on this edition of Searchlight. I appreciate each and every one of you. Please be sure to share this case. I don't think that it's region specific. Quite honestly, by this point, he could be anywhere. And the sheriff even talked about the fact that they were getting tips even out of the country. So please share this with your friends. Please make sure they know about this case. Talk to people about it. Obviously, you're going to see it pipe up in the news a bit more over these next few weeks. And let's just keep our eyes open and our hearts open, and hopefully this young man will be found. Take care, everyone. I'll see you next time on the Geek and Dorks channel.